Hello and welcome back to my channel. You may recognize the setup from the last video you probably watched because I literally just filmed my wrap-up video for the month of February. So if that's the last one you watch, then sorry, I'm wearing the exact same sweatshirt which says I need a nap and nothing has ever been more accurate. So I've had on my shelves quite a few books for a very long time now that I've just never picked up, and here's why. Almost all of these books, bar maybe two of them I think, are fantasy, pure fantasy, epic fantasy, high fantasy, whatever the fuck you want to call it. Fantasy that happens not in our world, day and age, but in a completely different type of world, often maybe with medieval undertones or something. I don't know. You know the type of fantasy that I mean. Except maybe I think this one that happens in a high school, and this one that I think might be a police, detective story, but it's pink and it just doesn't give me police detective story vibes, so I just get confused by this book. Whatever. This is a list of 6 books. Sorry, that was heavy. 6 books in total that I have owned for a very long time and have never actually picked up to read and have not wanted to pick up to read. And I guess one of the reasons why is probably because a lot of them are fantasy and I don't really like that genre anymore. I've just evolved from that genre so much that I almost pretty much never read of that genre anymore, and just isn't something that I'll pick up for a new book that I might be interested in reading. So that might be one of the reasons. Another reason is maybe just that every time I buy a new book, I'm like, I'm gonna read this one first. And who cares about all the other ones that are on my shelves and are waiting for me to pick them up? Which I know is a universal problem, or a booktube problem. A lot of people do that, and I know it seems like a waste, but it is not. I promise you, I do end up making a decision about all the books that are on my shelves, most of the time to read them, sometimes to unhaul them and give them to charity shops. So here we are in the land of the in-between, where I have not been able to make a decision on these 6 books yet. Do I want to unhaul them? They have been sitting on another shelf separate from my main one that is behind me, where I'm just waiting for charity shops to actually reopen in the UK because they're closed right now. And so I was thinking I would just unhaul these books and that's it. Except that since I've been looking at them on that shelf for a while now and I haven't been able to give them away yet since all the charity shops are closed right now, I've been thinking, what if I give them one last chance? One last chance before I unhaul these books. So what does that mean? That means I'm going to be reading the first chapter, and if that first chapter is extremely short, I'll read the second one as well. But let's, make a simple rule and say the first chapter of each of these books. And if I feel like I'm intrigued enough and I really want to know what's going to happen next, if that first chapter drags me in and makes me want to stay in that universe, then I'm keeping the book and I'm giving it a second and last chance. And if I'm not interested after reading that first chapter, if I find it boring or I'm dragging my feet or it's just not for me or whatever the reason, if I'm just not feeling that first chapter, I will unhaul that book and that's it. Bye bye. So what are each of these books? Let's go through the list first and then I'll start reading. So the first one I have is Grace and Fury by Tracy Bangard. Whatever. Grace and Fury. It says here, bold, brutal, beautiful. Serena Tesaro has been groomed her whole life to become a Grace, someone to stand by the heir to the throne as a shining, subjugated example of the perfect woman. It's her chance to secure a better life for her family and to keep her headstrong and rebellious younger sister Nomi out of trouble. But when Nomi catches the heir's eye instead, Serena is the one who takes the fall for the dangerous secret her sister has been hiding. Trapped in a life she never wanted, Nomi has only one option: surrender to her role as a Grace until she can use her position to save Serena. But this is easier said than done. A traitor walks the halls of the palazzo, and deception lurks in every corner. Meanwhile, Serena is running out of time, imprisoned on an island where she must fight to the death to survive, surrounded by women stronger than she is. One wrong move could cost her everything. There is no room for weakness on Mount Rune, especially weaknesses of the heart. Wow. A lot of these books, I may have forgotten to mention, came in book boxes, which is why a lot of them are actually signed. So this first one is actually 311 pages, which is quite short, especially for a fantasy book. So, you know, I could be fine with that. The first chapter is 6 pages, so I may add a second one to this. I feel like that's only fair. So I'll read until page 18, the first 2 chapters. The next book on this list is Girls of Paper and Fire by Natasha and Gan, and this is Sprayed Edges. It's gorgeous. It's such a beautiful cover as well, and I just feel sorry that I haven't been intrigued enough by the story to actually pick it up. Each year, 8 beautiful girls are chosen as paper girls to serve the king. It's the highest honor they could hope for, and the most demeaning. This year, there's a 9th, and instead of paper, she's made of fire. Lei is a member of the paper caste, the lowest and most persecuted class of people in Ikara. 10 years ago, her mother was snatched by the royal guards and her fate remains unknown. Now, the guards are back and this time it's Lei they're after. The girl with the golden eyes, whose rumored beauty has piqued the king's interest. Over weeks of training in the opulent but oppressive palace, Lei and 8 other girls learn the skills and charms that befit a king's consort. There, Lei does the unthinkable. She falls in love. Her forbidden romance becomes enmeshed with an explosive plot that threatens her world's entire way of life, and Lei, still the wide-eyed country girl at heart, must decide how far she's willing to go for justice and revenge. I'm not gonna lie, there's another reason I'm thinking of unhauling these books, is that a lot of them have what sounds to me like exactly the same plot. So it's all like similar to, what was it called, the chosen one, the selection, and I'm sure there's other books like that. It's basically about girls that are chosen to be some sort of courtesan fighting to the death other courtesans to be the king's favorite or some shit. And I, for some reason, own a lot of these books. I think it must have been in fashion a couple of years ago, more than a couple, but like a few years back, when I was actually subscribed to some of these subscription boxes, because a lot of those came in these subscription boxes, and for some reason that was the one thing everyone was publishing at the time. So that's also why I'm like, what is the point of me owning all of these books I'm not even that interested in, that all tell the same story? This one is 380 pages, a little bit bigger than the previous one. There's a prologue, will not count that. First chapter is 12 pages. I will also give it until chapter 2 because they're not that big, and chapter 2 finishes on page 19. So it's about the exact same length as the other one that I will also read 2 chapters of. Third book with pretty much the same story, The Glittering Cord by Richelle Mead. This one I actually bought myself, and the reason why is because I loved the Vampire Academy series that Richelle Mead has written, and the spin-off series as well with The Alchemist or whatever. So I really enjoyed those books, and I just thought maybe I'm gonna enjoy more books by her. But to be fair, it has a very similar story to these other 2 that I've just talked about, and maybe that's why I didn't partially want to pick it up, because it's just not my vibe anymore. For a select group of girls, there we go, The Glittering Court offers a shot at a life they've only ever dreamed of, one of luxury, glamour and leisure. To highborn Adelaide, whose wealthy family is forcing her into a loveless marriage, The Glittering Court represents something else, the chance to chart her own destiny, an adventure in an unspoiled, prosperous new land across the sea. After a chance meeting with the dazzling Cedric Thorne, Adelaide poses as a servant to join the crop of impoverished girls he promises to transform into proper ladies. But her familiarity with upper-class life comes with a price. She must hide her identity from her new friends, mysterious refugee Mira, and fiery former laundress Tamsin, and most importantly from Cedric himself, even though she's falling in love with him. Everything begins to crumble when Cedric discovers Adelaide's ruse, and she catches the eye of a powerful young governor who wants her for a wife. She didn't leave the gilded cage of her old life behind just to become someone else's property, but nothing is as daunting or as wonderful as the potent, forbidden attraction simmering between Adelaide and Cedric. One that, if acted on, would make them both outcasts in a wild, dangerous, uncharted world and possibly lead them to their death. This one is a total of... This one is bigger. This one is a total of 400 pages. That's a lot thicker than the other 2. And the first chapter is also 12 pages, and if I were to read 2 chapters, which might be the case for all of these books in the end, if I read 2 chapters, it's 24 pages in total, which I might do. Okay, let's go on a roll with the similar vibes of fantasy books that have very extremely similar plots, and pick up Mirage, which is the next one by Sumaya Daud. So this one also has sprayed edges, beautiful, also came in a box. The crown of Dia had been stripped from me, my face changed, my body broken. But I was not a slave, and I was not a spare. I was my mother's daughter, and I would survive and endure. I would find my way back home. In a star system dominated by the brutal Vathic Empire, 16-year-old Amani is a dreamer. She dreams of what life was like before the occupation, and of receiving a sign from Dia that one day she too will have adventures and travel beyond her isolated moon. But when adventure comes, it's not what she expects. She's kidnapped and taken in secret to the royal palace. There, she discovers she's nearly identical to the cruel half-Vathic Princess Maram. The princess is so hated by her conquered people that she requires a body double to appear in public, ready to die in her place. As Amani is forced into her new role, she can't help but enjoy the palace's beauty and her time with the princess's fiancé, Idris. But the glitter of the royal court belies a world of violence and fear, and she soon realizes that one wrong move could lead to her death. I mean, yeah, that's why they hired her. This sounds more sci-fi, but with somehow very similar vibes as well, of a court and a prince and a girl who's not what she seems to be. Whatever. I'm not making fun of these, I'm just saying they all sound the same to me, and maybe that's why I'm not going to enjoy all of them, but maybe I will enjoy one of them. This book is 310 pages in total, which is a little bit shorter, which is nice. And there is a map, like that, love that, a prologue, okay. Then first chapter, I will read a second chapter, they're all kind of the same length, so I'm going to end up reading 2 chapters for each of these books, I think. So, 2 chapters, page 22, that's where they end, so I think I will also do that for this book. Next, we're finally getting out of these medieval court-like things where girls have to fight for the hand of some prince or whatever, and getting into something a bit different with Rage Against the Dying by Becky Masterman. This one has a very different summary, for real. Remains found, confession secured, case closed. Or at least that's what the official FBI channels believe. But Bridget Quinn, a retired agent with a bloody secret of her own, doesn't think so. They've got the wrong man, which leaves only one question. What would make you confess to a murder you didn't commit? Which sounds exciting, to be fair. It's just that I don't know why I just never ended up picking it up. Maybe because it's one of these books I've never really heard of from anyone else, and I just probably bought it a really, really long time ago because I liked that it was pink or some shit. And now here we are, never read it. This book in total is 383 pages. There is a prologue that seems longer than in the other ones. Prologue is 10 pages, then chapter 1 is until page 20, so I think I'll read just that, prologue and chapter 1, because that's the equivalent of the other books. Finally, the 6th and final book in this little series is going to be The Merciless by Danielle Vega. This has such a cool cover, and I think I really enjoyed the concept when I read it a long time ago. Brooklyn Stevens sits in a pool of her own blood, tied up and gagged. No one outside of these dank basement walls knows she's here. No one can hear her scream. Sophia Flores knows she shouldn't have gotten involved. When she befriended the popular girls on her first day at school, she admired their perfect hair and their good girl ways. They said they wanted to save Brooklyn. They wanted to help her. Sophia didn't realize they believed Brooklyn was possessed. Now Sophia's new friends are performing an exorcism on Brooklyn, but their idea of an exorcism is closer to torture than salvation. Okay, that does still sound fun. Still now, as it did when I bought this book a long time ago. This book is a total of 279 pages, which is much shorter than the other ones, which makes me more excited for it for some reason. I do like short books. And the first chapter is 13 pages. Chapter 2 finishes on page 21, so I'll read 2 chapters as well. Sorry, that was a lot of synopsis, whatever, to read, so now my mouth is quite dry. I think I'm gonna have a little coffee. It is currently Sunday. I need to change the battery of this as well. So while I do that, I will start on the first book. I will read the first 2 chapters of Grace and Fury first, and I will let you guys know once I've done so. so I have now just read the first 2 chapters of Grace and Fury. So the first chapter is from the point of view of Serena, who's one of the 2 sisters that we follow, and she is basically really excited at the prospect of becoming one of the Graces. So she's just been selected as one of the prospects, which are the girls who are selected as the most beautiful and elegant and whatever in the country, I guess. A bunch of them are selected. They go to the palace, which is the palazzo, because everything seems to be slightly Italian inspired. And when they get there, the heir to the throne, apparently, decides on 3 Graces. He decides to pick 3 women amongst the selection that is there as the ones that he'd like, I guess, in his harem. It sounds a lot like that's what it is. And the Graces are meant to be the most elegant and beautiful women ever, and they're regarded with a lot of admiration and all that, but also they live in a palazzo, so they get, you know, a lot more benefits, I guess, than being a woman in a fucking village where you're allowed pretty much nothing, because we're living in a world where women have pretty much no rights, and their only prospects are pretty much to become a Grace if they're that lucky or that beautiful, or just work in a factory or clean up, you know, houses of the rich men that are in the cities or something, or get married and marry rich enough, I guess. So that's the only things that women can do. The first chapter, being the point of view of Serena, she is quite happy that she was selected as one of the prospects because she thinks it's the key to a better life for her and her sister, because a woman who's selected as a prospective Grace can get with her a handmaiden, and in this case it's her sister Nomi. And Nomi is the second point of view we get in the second chapter, and Nomi is the more rebellious one, the one who's like, it's not gonna be a better life, you're literally gonna be treated as an actual object, and that sounds terrible, and I don't want any part of it, but I guess I have to go with you, whatever, because I'm your handmaiden now. And in the second chapter, we actually get to see the girls being taken away to the palazzo and arriving there and being introduced there. And handmaidens are meant to be completely invisible and no one really notices them, but Nomi accidentally she goes into the big library room that's in the palace and finds a book there that is a book she read as a young girl, illegally, because women are not allowed to read. And so she picks it up and decides to steal it, thinking no one's gonna notice. And then she gets out of there and accidentally runs into the actual heir, the guy who's meant to select his Graces. And his name is Malachi. He is very suspicious and is like, what are you doing here? She was like, I was just using the toilet. It's over there. Like, what do you want from me? And basically, she's a bit defiant and he notices her, and that's not meant to happen, and it's pretty clear to me exactly what's going to happen in this book afterwards. I think also from the synopsis, there was a lot that was revealed in the synopsis, so it seems clear to me that her sister Serena is the one who's going to be accused of stealing the book, because it says here that Serena is running out of time, imprisoned on an island where she must fight to the death to survive, blah blah blah. So it seems to me like Serena's going to be accused of a crime she didn't do, so I'm wondering if it's the stealing of the book or something like that. And Nomi catches the heir's eye instead. Serena is the one who takes the fall for the dangerous secret her sister has been hiding. So yes, it seems to me like because of Nomi's action, she's gonna be one of the Graces, and the heir is gonna be like, I like her, and they're gonna be like, who took this book? And Serena's gonna take the fall for it and gonna be sent to some prison mountain thingy. The fact that I know what's gonna happen doesn't make me want to read the book anymore. This is where we're at, and I'm just like, I think I'm done with it. Like, it was nice. It's nicely written. I think the writing style is very nice and flowy. It's not a huge book either, so I could easily get through it if I wanted to, but I'm just not that interested in what's going to happen next. So I think it was a good test for me to try this book. I've given it another chance. I'm glad that I did. I'm glad that I tried the first 2 chapters. I now know if I try any more than that, I'm probably just never going to pick it up again and go into a reading slump, just because it's not a story that I'm going to enjoy that much. I think I could read it very passively and end up rating it 3 stars by the end of it, and because I can already predict all of this, I don't think I should read any more than that. So that's it. That's my decision for this first book. Grace and Fury, looking good, just not for me. Unhauling. Okay, so I guess the second book is Girls of Paper and Fire by Natasha Ngan, and I said as well that I would read the first 2 chapters, which end on page 19. So I'm gonna read 19 pages of this book and then I will let you know how I feel about it. Okay, so I've now read 2 chapters of Girls of Paper and Fire, including prologue, chapter 1, chapter 2, and there's also a little bit of introductory pieces at the front that are just, you have a map that I think I showed you, and then there's something about casts as well to explain the different casts that are in the book, which explain you have the paper cast, the steel cast, and the moon cast. So the paper cast is fully human, unadorned with any animal demon features, and incapable of demon abilities such as flight. Steel cast, humans endowed with partial animal demon qualities, both in physicality and abilities. And then the moon cast, fully demon with whole animal demon features such as horns, wings, or fur on a humanoid form, and complete demon capabilities. So it's kind of a good little guide to explain how this works in this book. At the beginning of the book we follow this girl called Lei, and she is part of the paper cast, so the lower one, the one that doesn't have any special powers or anything from demon capabilities or whatever they're calling it, so fully human. And she lives with her dad and they run a little store, like a little shop. And they are friends with another woman who is called Tian, who works for them, and that woman is partially demon, so she's got like lynx ears and a little bit of fur and things like that. And basically Lei remembers with pain how her mother was taken by some of the Demon King's soldiers that are fully demon and therefore mooncast. She remembers like a certain day in particular when they came and took her away, including other women of the village or something. There's also something about her having golden eyes that are very striking and different from anyone else, and because she does, a lot of people are like, oh, it probably brings luck, so we think that whatever she's preparing in the store, it brings it luck and we like it and we want it more. So people are like aware of this, and there's like a rumor about her having these, you know, bright golden eyes, which isn't a normal feature and that her parents don't have. And then in the second chapter you have soldiers that come again to the village, and this time they take her away, and in a very violent manner, and they explain that it's to become a paper girl, and paper girls are basically the harem, I guess, that belongs to the Demon King or something like that. So the awful soldier, who's clearly an asshole, says to her dad, "You should be smiling, old man. This girl is to become what so many in our kingdom dream for their own daughters. She'll live in the hidden palace of Han, lead a privileged life of service to our gracious leader, outside, off, and in the royal bed." Your own daughter, a paper girl. I bet you never dreamed you'd be so fortunate. So clearly non-consensual for sure, but basically that's why they're taking her away and kidnapping her, and when they do, they're so very clearly the bad guys. They even kill her dog, which I'm just still shaking from, because I'm just like, don't kill the dogs. So be careful if you want to read this book. The dog dies in it. But I got really invested in it. Really invested in it. I really wanted to read some more after the second chapter. I was like, what the fuck is gonna happen to her? Basically, I don't think I'm gonna unhaul this book. I'm gonna keep this book because it passes the test of, you know, the second or last or only chance it's ever had, because I've never actually read these first 2 chapters before. So yes, I'm gonna keep this book. I'm definitely gonna keep on reading it because I got invested in it after these 2 chapters. Alright, that means the next book I'm going to be reading, to stay in the same vein of stories, I'm going to be reading the first 2 chapters from The Glittering Court by Richelle Mead. So that will lead me to read 24 pages in total of this book, and I guess I will let you guys know how it goes very soon. I have now just finished the first 2 chapters of The Glittering Court by Richelle Mead. So in these 2 chapters we follow, I guess, the lady of this big place called Lady Whitmore, Countess of Rothford, but we don't actually get a first name, unless I wasn't paying attention. We did, and I just don't know what it is, but I'm pretty sure that we do not get a first name, which is interesting because the synopsis named her Adelaide, and then we meet one of her servants at some point, a maid called Ada, that she then reveals is her full name is Adelaide, and because of what I know is going to happen next, it's pretty clear that it's a name she's taking on, but I don't know whether she's taking it on because it is also her first name or just because she's taking the maid's place. Let me explain it a little bit more. So our main character is basically a countess from a very, very prestigious family. This is fantasy, so it kind of feels like fake England, I want to say. And she's considered of the highest society because her ancestor was a really famous guy and a famous earl and like such an important guy or whatever, and she's one of his only descendants. So everyone is like, oh my god, you're the descendant of that earl, blah blah blah, who cares? But the point is that she's of the nobility that is slowly losing its money. So she's got no money and her estate is kind of slowly going downhill because of that. She's lost her parents who are dead, and she lives with her grandmother and a bunch of servants, of course. And basically her grandma comes to her in the first chapter and says, we have a marriage offer and you're gonna have to take it because it's like pretty much your only offer, because no one else wants to deal with your lack of money, even though you have the title and the ancestor to show for or whatever. So she's saying it's one of her, I guess, cousins, although she seems to say that the term is kind of loose. And this guy introduces himself with his grandmother, who is going to become therefore like her grandma-in-law, I guess, and who's very much saying like, okay, you'll still have this and you'll still have that and you'll have a lot of fun organizing this and that under my supervision. So she's making it very clear that she's going to take care of everything and everything is going to now become her decision. Everything in our main character's life. And the cousin in question, who's meant to become her husband, is extremely boring, and our main character makes a lot of quite witty, I did enjoy the humor, jokes in the beginning when he's talking and explaining stuff about his estate, I guess, and he doesn't laugh at a single one of them, not just because he doesn't seem to understand that a single one of those is a joke. So very dull guy, and clearly our main character is not going to be happy about that. So in the second chapter, what happens is she is letting go of a lot of servants from her castle, I guess, her palace, I don't know, because this is what her future grandmother-in-law has ordered her to do and said, you won't need all of these people when you come to live in that place with your new husband, blah, blah. So get rid of half of your estate, pretty much, and half of your servants. So they're letting go a lot of people, which is very sad, and she hears that there's one of her servants, one of her maids, personal maids, Ada, is crying about something with this guy who's been sent to like give her a new place to work at. So she's curious what's going on. So she goes to see what happened. Ada is in tears, and this guy, who happens to be extremely handsome, his name is Cedric Thorne, and he kind of explains, well, we're taking Ada to be trained for an entire year to become pretty much the same as you, have all of the qualities that are looked for in a noble wife, because then she gets a chance to be sent to Adoria and under this program called the Glittering Court, which is where they take young maid servants, women of lower classes, to transform them into seemingly perfectly noble future wives for these guys who all live in Adoria. And Adoria is basically this place that is in the New World. So it sounds a lot like we're starting in England and then it's to move to what happened when colonization happened and all that, and the Americas. So this is kind of the future United States from my guess of what is going on in this world, in this fantasy world. They're saying, well, a lot of the men who have settled there have become new nobles. This new nobility is happening because they've arrived there, they've become like governors and stuff, and they've made their way into becoming more powerful men of this new society they're creating over there in this new world. A lot of them are not interested in what he literally says are savage wives, and basically they're saying the locals is that's how they see them, and that's why we're sending these girls after training them, because at the moment there's a lack of women in this new world, and a lot of the noble women aren't exactly rushing at the door, queuing up to go to this new world, because it's still very untamed and savage or whatever. And although it may sound like an adventure to our main character, it doesn't to most noble women. So Ada is clearly unhappy about this, and she's like, I would just be like an item, like an object, and I don't really want to. Our main character, whose first name we don't know yet, at some point goes like, oh, your full name is Adelaide? When she signs the contract. And that's why I'm guessing that maybe her first name is also Adelaide, because it says so in the synopsis. Either that, or she's thinking she's gonna take Ada's place because she wants to escape this arranged marriage of hers, and clearly she seems to think that it all sounds very exciting and like an adventure, so she wants to go in her stead. And I think that's what's gonna happen. She's gonna take Ada's place and be fake trained into a noble woman to be then sent to Adoria, because it sounds very exciting to her. That's the first two chapters, and that's pretty much where we've gotten to. I like the main character. I think she's quite funny and feisty, and that's something that I've always enjoyed from Richelle Mead's books, the ones that I've read in the past. I always think that her main characters are brilliant and such good main characters. But I gotta say, the plot, the overall intrigue doesn't interest me that much. I think it's just something that I'm like, I could read on. I think I would have fun reading it on right now, but also if I put it down tonight, tomorrow, I'm probably not gonna want to pick it up again. Like, I'll be like, yeah, it's okay, I'd rather read this first. And then that could happen a lot, and then I would end up never picking it up again, which is kind of what happened originally when I bought it. I was interested in this synopsis, and then I never actually picked it up. So although I loved this author and I was slightly intrigued by the first two chapters, I'm trying to be a little bit more ruthless with the amount of books that I have as well, and I think I'm gonna unhaul this one as well. So this one goes in the unhauling pile. Which leads us to our next book, which is Mirage by Sumaya Daud, and this one is yet another one that happens in a fantasy setting with a sort of court with nobles and stuff, but I believe this one is sci-fi instead of fantasy, so it might feel slightly different from the other three I have now started. Yeah, so I guess I will let you guys know once I've read the first two chapters. Read two chapters of Mirage by Sumaya Daud, and I reached page 22. So what happens in the first 2 chapters is we basically follow Amani, our main character, as she tells us about the fact that she's going to enter a certain ceremony in order to become an adult, as she's part of some sort of tribe on a moon, I guess, or a planet, I'm not quite sure, that has been invaded or taken over or kind of ruled by people called the Vatek or the Vathek. I'm not sure how to pronounce that right. It was in the synopsis as well, but basically they kind of just burned down their fields and everything, and the only reason why is because they thought there were rebels or resistance or whatever, and obviously it could just be that they wanted to make sure that the people were being subdued. So that's kind of where we're at. There's not that much else that's happened really. There's a lot of world building, I'd say, in the first 2 chapters. There's not much action to talk about. There's not that much that's happened. We just follow her in the 2nd chapter as she goes through the ceremony in order to become an adult, which involves getting some sort of tattoos on her face called her Dan. And her mom is very proud of her, and she's talking about her family. She has 2 brothers that she talks about as well. And she kind of tells us a lot about, I guess, this Messiah woman who she loves the stories about and the poems talking about her, and these are illegal actually because religious poetry and religious texts, I guess, are illegal because they're considered dangerous by the Vathek, because I guess they kind of led to the rebellion. I'm not quite sure. But basically, yeah, there's a lot of names of different things, and oh god, it's so much fantasy. Even though it's sci-fi, it's a very fantasy type of sci-fi. Apart from the mention of different moons and systems and, you know, the people called the Vathek who are taking over their land or whatever, apart from those mentions, it's just fantasy really. It's just like a different world, a different universe, different names, different everything, and not so much sci-fi based on things like our own world would have expanded or whatever. We don't have any references to things like Earth as we know it in this sci-fi type of universe, so it's very much sci-fi fantasy or fantasy sci-fi, I don't know which order you put them in, but yeah. And I think it could be very fun and could be very entertaining. I gotta say, the writing style is beautiful. It is beautifully written, but I just don't think I'm that interested in it. Like, 2 chapters were not enough to make me that invested. Maybe more could make me invested, but I don't want to push because this is one of the books that I was thinking of unhauling anyway, so this is the point of this, is if I'm not that interested after 2 chapters, I think I should unhaul it. And clearly it was okay, but just not for me, not the kind of story that I'm that interested in reading on, I guess. So that's it for this book. So I'm now going to be reading the 2 first chapters of Rage Against the Dying. Let me double check. No, I think I'm only going to be reading the first chapter of Rage Against the Dying because that is 20 pages, which kind of is similar to a lot of the other books' 2 first chapters. So that's the next one. So I've now read the first 2 chapters of the first chapter, sorry, of Rage Against the Dying. There is a prologue though, and it is a little bit long, so I guess I kind of count this as 2 chapters. So this one is completely different from all the other books that I have read in this little video, because this is the first thriller, I guess, compared to all the other books that were fantasy, high fantasy, and one sci-fi fantasy, I guess. So in this one we follow, in the prologue, there's a serial killer that we're following, I guess, who clearly has a thing for older women and is trying to kidnap so that he can, I guess, rape and kill this older woman that he sees at the beach who's trying to collect rocks or something. And when he attacks her, grabs her and puts her in his van, he thinks, okay, that's gonna be an easy one. She's not really like fighting or anything, she's not very strong. But then realizes something is hurting him when he tries to grab her walking stick, and the end of her walking stick happens to be a razor sharp blade or something. And then he realizes, okay, that's not just a normal little old lady. And then at the end of the prologue, although the whole prologue is written in the 3rd person, we first started with the point of view 3rd person of the serial killer, and then we end the last few paragraphs with the point of view of the lady in question, and then we understand that she was doing this on purpose, and clearly she's trying to catch the guy and thinks that she now has proof that he's been killing. We get that feeling because it says here at some point, the dried blood on the floor of the van confirmed she wasn't his first. There were bodies hidden somewhere. She was in a unique position to confirm that without the legal strictures of interrogation and defense counsel. Which kind of gives you an idea that we're talking about a cop here. And then we get into chapter 1, which says it's 10 days earlier, so before this happens, and we kind of get the idea of who this is, and this is a woman called Bridget Quinn, our main character, as it says on the back, who is a retired FBI agent, and she kind of tells us a little bit about her past and her story, how she ended up where she is, how she retired, and kind of like what, you know, she used to work as an FBI agent, you know, specialized in a lot of undercover operations and everything, and then went into investigations, and then finally retired, met her husband, and she kind of talks a lot about that, and we basically get glimpses into her life before we know anything about the case in question, and I'm gonna guess that chapter 2 delves into the case that launched her onto the tracks of the serial killer. So this is well written. Again, I feel like all the books that I've picked so far are quite well written. Nothing has been bad really so far. And it does seem to me like it's a little bit older because it was published in 2013, and you kind of, I don't know, maybe it's me, maybe I don't read that many thrillers, just average thrillers in general, and I only read the brand new ones that people have been talking about on BookTube or Instagram or whatever, but it just feels a little bit in an older writing style sometimes, just because there's a few moments where she says things like, I don't give a rat's ass, etc., and it's just, I almost want to call it tough language that you would find in badass characters that are talking first person, because yes, the first chapter after the prologue becomes first person point of view, and I feel like these type of thrillers are written in that way, maybe, I don't know, where you have the characters kind of language that seeps through the pages when she talks, because it is for first person, and a lot of it is like, I'm a tough girl and I use, you know, tough language, I guess. I don't know if I'm making sense, but I just gotta say it's just not my type. It's not something that I enjoy reading particularly, although it is well written. It's just not something that felt like it was my vibe. And the story itself either, I just feel like I'm not that intrigued by what's gonna happen next, to how she ended up in that van, how she ended up on the trail of this guy. It almost made me feel like giving me the prologue kind of gave me too much, to the point where I was like, well, I kind of know where she's gonna end up. She's probably gonna manage to get on top of this and fight off the guy and figure out how to prove that he killed the other women, I guess, and that's it. Like, it's not that intriguing anymore, probably because of the prologue. It just feels extremely predictable because of it, and I just don't really feel that intrigued anymore after reading this first chapter. So I don't think I'm gonna keep this book. It's gonna be another Unhaul. Which leads me to my final book, The Merciless by Danielle Vega. Forgive us, Father, for we have sinned, it says on the back. So yeah, that is the last book that I'm gonna be reading in this video. I mean, not book, chapters. I will also be reading 2 chapters of this one because it ends on page 21, which feels like it's the equivalent of the other books. This is the last one. I have now read the first 2 chapters of The Merciless by Danielle Vega, and I'm not gonna keep it. So that was the last book. Basically, in the first 2 chapters, we follow our main character Sophia, who just moved schools, and she kind of lets it known that she moves schools all the time, and that this isn't her first rodeo as a new girl. And she's just at her new school and kind of accidentally picks at her fingernails from nervousness, I guess, and like makes herself bleed. So she's asking this guy, oh, sorry, can you pass me the napkins, because he's standing in front of them. So she meets this jock looking type of guy who's very cute, called Charlie, I think, and then this other girl called Brooklyn, and so she kind of has like a friendly chat with them. And Brooklyn seems like the kind of girl who's a little bit more edgy and kind of cool looking. But then this very preppy and popular looking girl comes in to talk to the cafeteria, and her name is Riley, and she's like, oh, we're gonna be doing... She says, it's time for the annual school food drive for the St. Michael's Soup Kitchen. I hope this year you'll all help me to do God's work and bring in food for the homeless, etc. So clearly she's a religious and dedicated young lady, I guess. So that's kind of the first impression we get of those different characters. Then Sophia goes outside of the cafeteria, and there she smells something really strange, and then she realizes it's coming from the dead body of a skinned cat. That's right, gross. And oh, I really dislike books that do this to me about killing animals. I'm like, please stop. Anyway, she sees that cat dead on the floor somewhere, and the girl who was just talking about the food drive, Riley, arrives and goes like, oh my god, that's so gross, come with me, clearly you look like you're gonna feel ill, come with me and sit with my friends. So Sophia is like quite happy because she's quite clearly a popular girl, and it's nice when you're the new girl to be invited by the popular girl to join her group of friends. So they go and sit down together, and she meets her other friends who are all very preppy and popular looking as well, and they kind of just talk to her a little bit. And then the girls kind of say like, oh, you know, this dead cat, we think maybe it's this girl Brooklyn, the one she's just met, who looked edgy, because there's been a bunch of rumors about her. They don't really say exactly what the rumors are, except that she's been acting extremely strange, doing some weird chanting and everything. They're kind of making it sound like Brooklyn is like worshipping the devil or some shit like that. And then Sophia goes home, I guess. In chapter 2, we see her coming back home to her mom and her grandmother. And we get this impression that religion is kind of a big theme in this book and in her family, because her grandmother was extremely religious and her mother rejected religion completely and is absolutely anti-Christian and anti-religion in general. But it seems like Sophia quite likes the idea of religion and wearing a cross like her grandmother and everything. And then we see her helping her grandma, who's in bed after she's had a stroke that kind of has left her paralyzed, I guess. It's not very clear what her grandmother's state is, but it seems like she hasn't said a word since her stroke. She's just in bed, and Sophia is the one who's making her do exercises by moving her legs for her and everything. And that's it. It almost feels like she's just completely catatonic, and I have no idea whether that's the case or not, but that's the impression we get from that chapter. And then I guess Sophia has a little bit of an argument with her mom as well, because she's talking about this cross that Sophia was wearing and telling her like, you should not be wearing that, it's not just for pretty or whatever. It takes the cross back. But it seems like Sophia wants to wear the cross maybe because her grandmother is very religious and she doesn't think it's such a bad thing. And that's about it, really. That's all we know from the first 2 chapters. I did have a little bit of a sneak peek to a little bit further into the book here and there, like a couple of chapters further in, and I just don't think I'm gonna be that interested in reading it once again. So it's nicely written and all that. It feels quite fast-paced, and I think just in general the writing style is very flowy, so that would be fine, but I just don't think that the story interests me that much. Again, a little bit like the previous one, I almost feel like it's predictable. Like I can kind of tell what's gonna go on and what's gonna happen throughout the book, and I'm just not really wanting to figure it out. I feel like because it's predictable, it's not something that I want to read right now. I want a little bit more unpredictable and surprises in my reading, I guess, and just something that would feel more original. I'm not saying this story isn't original, but maybe it's also because it's an older book. I think it says here that it was published in 2014, so similar to the other book that I decided not to keep, Rage Against the Dying. So both of those are from the same era, and I guess maybe both of those are giving me predictable vibes, so maybe it was a thing from the time, I don't know, but I just don't think that it's worth me keeping it, because I doubt that I will want to pick it back up if I put it down again. That was it. That was all 6 books that I decided whether to unhaul or not based on the first 2 chapters, and there's only one that I decided to keep in the end, which is Girls of Paper and Fire, and every other book I've decided that I would unhaul. So that's my little conclusion. I'm quite happy with the result of this because I feel like if I had decided to keep all of them, then it would have felt a little bit useless, because the point is to get rid of books and not keep everything on my shelves and do a little bit of a cleaning up of my shelves, I guess, of my TBR shelves. So I'm quite happy with the result of this. I feel like deciding to keep one book out of 6 is good. Those are good odds. And on top of that, it does feel like I gave all of these books a fair chance. Because I feel like if after the first 2 chapters I'm not intrigued, it's unlikely I will want to pick that book very often. And it's likely it will just put me in a reading slump if I keep it and try to force myself. So I feel quite happy with the decision for all of these books. I guess that's it for this video, which was a little bit different from usual. I quite enjoy doing this, and I definitely think I will do it again in the future whenever I have another batch of books that I feel like maybe I should unhaul. So if you enjoyed this, please leave a comment, leave a like. Let me know in the comments down below if you think this is fun and I should do it again, because I definitely had fun. Consider subscribing, ringing that bell, all that jazz, and I will see you guys in the next one.